General Johnson's jaw clenched as the cold steel of the handcuffs dug into her bleeding wrists. "Call the Pentagon!" she hissed at the cashier, voice low but urgent. The terrified young woman fumbled for the store phone. From across the counter, the officer, a white man barely out of his 20s, laughed dismissively. "Sure, ma'am, right after we call the president." Just moments before Teresa Johnson had stepped into Magnolia Mart for a bottle of water on her 6-hour drive home, her faded jeans and navy sweater gave no hint of the 4 stars she'd earned in uniform, no sign she was the highest-ranking black female general in the U.S. Army. Behind the register, Walter Smith, a wary man in his 60s with deep-set eyes, watched her every move. 3 other customers browsed aisles, oblivious to the storm about to break. As she placed her water and a protein bar on the counter, a middle-aged man in work boots bolted out of the magazine rack. "My wallet's gone," he shouted, voice echoing off the tile floor. Smith leaped out from behind the counter, rigid with suspicion. "When did you last have it?" he barked, pointing a trembling finger at Teresa. "She's the only stranger here." Teresa froze. "Sir, I haven't even left this side of the store." Her military training flooded back, "Stay calm, don't make sudden moves," but the humidity of that Georgia afternoon pressed down on her like a weight. In that charged moment, decades of service and honor meant nothing when a single accusation hung in the air. Walter snatched the store phone, pressing numbers with trembling fingers. "I need the police at Sunshine Convenience right away." Teresa took a measured breath, gathering herself for what she knew would be a battle of respect and authority far removed from any battlefield she had ever commanded. In the humid stillness, the stage was set for a confrontation no one saw coming, one that would test not just her courage, but the very principles of justice on which she had built her life. Teresa's gentle request, "Just water, please," was met with instant suspicion. Walter Smith's face tightened as he demanded she empty her pockets. "I haven't done anything wrong," she said quietly, setting her water bottle and a granola bar neatly on the counter. The heat of the Georgia afternoon pressed against her back, but she remained composed. When she turned to leave, Smith snatched the store phone and barked into the receiver. "I'm calling the police. There's a thief here." 15 minutes later, Patrol Car 12 creaked into the lot. Officer Brent Foster, young, clean-cut, eager, strode inside with veteran officer Jacob Mitchell, close behind, his uniform creased and eyes weary from years on the road. Foster scanned the room, hand resting on his holster. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked, voice courteous but firm. Walter pointed at Teresa. "This woman stole a wallet," he blurted, voice trembling with accusation. The words hung like a challenge in the stale air. Teresa paused and lifted her hand to show her military ID. In an instant, Foster's expression shifted. With startling speed, he lunged across the counter and yanked her wrist. Teresa cried out as cold steel bit into her skin, bruising her wrist in one swift motion. Mitchell shoveled Teresa toward the counter's edge. "Hands behind your back," he barked. Teresa flinched, but her posture remained unbowed, years of military discipline guiding her. She complied, though each second was agony, as blood from a gash on her temple dripped down her cheek and stained her sweater. The steel cuffs snapped shut around her wrist, locking her into the scarlet ledger of prejudice. In that moment, a decorated general who had led troops through combat zones was treated not as a leader, but as a common criminal. The humiliation cut deeper than any battlefield wound. As Teresa stood pressed against the counter, every flicker of her resolve shone through the haze of fear she would not be erased by a single act of injustice. At Pinewood County Sheriff's Station, the steady clang of handcuffs and the low hum of copy machines provided a grim soundtrack. Sheriff Brock Whitman loomed in his polished uniform, decades of enforcement etched into his scowl. "Name, rank, and serial number," he droned, voice flat and unyielding. Teresa dared to ask for water and a phone call. Whitman only scoffed. Deputies Jessica Murphy and Thomas Wilson methodically processed her belongings, purse, wallet, folded military ID, into evidence bags. Murphy paused, eyes widening at the sight of her credentials. Whitman waved her concern away. "Probably a fake," he muttered without a second glance. Meanwhile, Teresa's request for medical care was met with silence. She was led to a bare cell and joined by 3 other women. Tamika Jones jailed for loitering after a late shift. Maria accused of shoplifting, she never committed. And one more, her eyes downcast but proud. Huddled on the narrow bench, they exchanged whispered stories of overzealous stops, trumped-up charges, and the suffocating weight of prejudice enforced under the guise of law. In that cramped space, their shared accounts wove a portrait of systemic targeting minority citizens caught in a cycle of discrimination wielded in the name of public safety. Meanwhile, Zoe Chen refused to stand by and watch injustice unfold. Inside a back office, she rewound the store's security footage again and again. Teresa Johnson's calm compliance, the officer's unprovoked aggression, the sudden yank of her arm, and the flash of steel handcuffs. The scene left Zoe's hands trembling, but not her resolve. As dust settled over Pinewood, she slipped out from behind the counter and dialed the Pentagon's emergency protocol, Alpha 7 Delta 93, her voice steady as she spoke the code. Within minutes, security monitors at Colonel James Harrison's command center sprang into life, highlighting the coordinates of Magnolia Mart. Under orders from General Victor Chen and Colonel Sofia Rodriguez, military police, and Judge Advocate, general officers piled into sleek black SUVs, engines purring like coiled steel. FBI agent Daniel Foster from the Civil Rights Division joined them, their badges gleaming under the parking lot lights. No sirens announced their approach, precision was paramount. As they drove down dusty Pinewood streets, neighbors peered from windows, sensing that something monumental was underway. Pulling up to the sheriff's station, the convoy created an abrupt and silent cordon of authority around Whitman's domain. The station's fluorescent glow spilled onto the asphalt as uniformed commanders stepped onto the pavement, their presence radiating quiet inevitability. Sheriff Brock Whitman emerged, attempting to reassert control, but the rigid lines of authority around him told a different story. Before he could speak, Colonel Rodriguez produced the authenticated code and issued direct orders: release General Johnson immediately. This matter falls under federal jurisdiction. Whitman's badge, once a symbol of local power, suddenly felt heavy on his chest. He ground his teeth, but obeyed. "She's free to go," he muttered, voice tight. As the federal officers unlocked Teresa's cell and escorted her back to the curb, the entire station seemed to exhale in relief. In those few charged minutes, the balance of power shifted irrevocably. Zoe watched from the window, realizing that a single act of conscience, pressing play, dialing one code, could summon the highest levels of authority to right a local wrong. In Pinewood that night, justice arrived, not with a roar, but with the silent precision of those unwilling to accept the status quo. Released under federal orders, she emerged into the humid Georgia evening beneath the flickering porch light of the sheriff's station. Medics had bandaged her blood-streaked temple, but her four-star insignia still gleamed in the camera lights. News vans swarmed like eager moths, lenses trained on the general who had once commanded hundreds and now commanded the spotlight herself. Stepping forward, she placed a hand on the podium and spoke with the calm authority that had guided her through battlefields. "What happened to me today could happen to any American regardless of rank or station." At her side stood Benjamin Taylor, a renowned civil rights attorney whose presence signaled the gravity of what was unfolding. He addressed the crowd. "We are filing a federal civil rights lawsuit against Sheriff Whitman officers Foster and Mitchell and Judge William Crawford. This is about more than a single wrongful arrest. It exposes systemic discrimination cloaked in routine policing." The murmurs of approval swelled into cheers from bystanders, some wiping away tears, others stamping their feet in support. The charges spanned civil rights violations, conspiracy to deprive constitutional protections, and obstruction of justice. Taylor outlined how records would be subpoenaed, how depositions would be taken under oath, and how every court in the land would see the proof of what routine stops had meant in Pinewood County. Even Mayor James Williams stepped up, voice firm. "This isn't just a local matter. We must overhaul our policies now. Bias training, civilian oversight, mandatory body cameras to ensure no neighbor ever endures what General Johnson did." In that charged moment, Teresa's composed insistence on accountability sent ripples far beyond county lines. Veterans groups pledged to support the lawsuit. Civil rights organizations prepared amicus briefs. Journalists from Atlanta to D.C. promised follow-up coverage. And in living rooms across America, where elderly couples listened by PBS and younger viewers scrolled through social feeds, a single truth settled in: when a decorated general can be treated like a criminal, no one is safe from prejudice. Her quiet resolve had ignited a blaze of reform. Now the question wasn't whether justice would be served, but how deeply this reckoning would reshape the American promise of equal protection under the law. Federal investigators moved swiftly, seizing the ex-sheriff's home server and following digital breadcrumbs straight into the heart of the Heritage Protection Council, a shadowy white supremacist network that had quietly infiltrated law enforcement. Before dawn, coordinated raids in 12 states unfolded like clockwork agents in unmarked vans, rifles cradled at ready, more than 50 officers and elected officials cuffed on charges ranging from conspiracy to domestic terrorism. Pinewood County, once a sleepy backwater, found itself at the epicenter of a national reckoning. Headlines blazed across screens. White supremacist ring busted in dozen states. Lawmen turned conspirators, justice for all, or justice for some. Inside the hastily arranged civic hall community, leaders of every striped faith, pastors, school principals, nonprofit directors came together to sign the Pecan Pie Pledge, symbolizing a collective promise to root out bias in schools, policing, and healthcare. Each signature, penned in bold black ink, felt like a brick laid in a new foundation for equity. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the magnolia-lined streets, a second reconciliation forum convened. Teresa Johnson, still in her dress blues, took the stage once more, now not just as a plaintiff, but as a guiding force for change. Her voice, though soft with weariness from the long battle, carried unwavering conviction. Systemic change demands sustained vigilance, not a single victory. She paused, letting the words settle like seeds in fertile soil. In the hushed auditorium, elders dabbed at tears, while young families leaned forward, eyes bright with resolve. The mayor pledged new oversight councils. County commissioners vowed to tie funding to equity outcomes. School superintendents announced inclusive history curricula. But it was Teresa's quiet courage that left the deepest mark. As chairs scraped underfoot and the forum drew to a close, her final admonition hung in the air. We must watch our institutions every day, questioning, documenting, speaking out until the promise of justice truly belongs to everyone. In that moment, Pinewood's Phoenix rose, a community reborn from hidden prejudice into active partnership, ready to tend the reforms they had just pledged to protect. 1 year later, the very stretch of road that witnessed such raw violence now bears a modest bronze plaque reading simply, "Honor Under Fire." Beneath the gentle sway of magnolia blossoms, Teresa Johnson, fully recovered and resplendent in her dress blues, stood before a gathering woven from every corner of the community. The late spring air held the fragrance of white blooms and the quiet hum of cicadas as uniformed officers formed a precise line, each snapping an immaculate salute as she lifted a folded American flag. This flag, she said, voice soft yet resonant, is a symbol of both dignity and breached trust. With deliberate care, she placed it in a glass-fronted case mounted just above the plaque. The crowd watched in hushed reverence, knowing they were witnessing more than a simple dedication. They clasped hands, families brimming with pride, neighbors whose eyes glistened with tears, and children waving miniature standards that bobbed like hopeful ripples. The ceremony eschewed fanfare, no brass marching band, no cheering crowds on bleachers. Instead, its power lay in the unity of small gestures, a grandmother's hand on a grandchild's shoulder, a veteran wiping his eyes, a youth pastor bowing his head in silent prayer. As Teresa stepped back, the breeze carried the faint rustle of magnolia petals tumbling onto the asphalt, a delicate reminder of both fragility and resilience. In each bowed head and respectful nod, Oakage County citizens renewed their pledge to keep watch over one another, to remember the day when prejudice nearly stole a hero's life, and to guard the promise that respect and justice must travel hand in hand. Let this plaque not mark an end, Teresa concluded, but serve as a beginning, a beacon that guides us to protect the dignity of every person on every corner of our streets. As the sun dipped lower, the assembled community lingered, voices low, and shared conversation about the journey, how far they'd come, and how far still they must go. Under the magnolias' gentle shade, Oakage found not only closure, but a living testament to the power of collective resolve and the enduring bond between honor and justice. Through the gauntlet of these trials, Oakage learned a fundamental truth. Injustice deepens in the dark, but quiet, resolute courage can bring it into the light and shatter prejudice's hold. The veteran's composed reaction under fire, raising her ID calmly even as a gun barrel pressed her temple, became a modern blueprint for dignity. Schools across Pinewood County began to replay dashcam stills in civics classes, not to sensationalize violence, but to teach students that every citizen wields power to transform personal trauma into collective action. Weekly town halls invited both police commanders and community leaders to the same stage. Heated debates gave way to honest dialogue as officers listened to parents who recounted frightened rides home, while residents heard firsthand of the weight of a badge carried by someone they once distrusted. These meetings, often tense, forged new bonds. Shared meals replaced tense showdowns, and handshakes spontaneously followed apologies. Veteran support groups, long focused on battlefield trauma, broadened their mission by forming coalitions with civil rights nonprofits. Together, they hosted stand-up Saturdays, where veterans and activists told side-by-side stories of resilience, demonstrating that service to country extends beyond uniform tours into the fabric of everyday justice. Lawyer mediators led workshops on rights during traffic stops, equipping citizens with the language and tactics to uphold their dignity when facing official power. Each initiative, from classroom screenings to coalition rallies, aimed to prevent a repeat of that fateful day when no uniform could shield its wearer from a single choice fueled by hate. Oakage discovered that preventing injustice demands constant tending policies strengthened by human stories and systems anchored by communities willing to speak out. In the aftermath, the town's quiet streets held a new promise, that when citizens and officers alike refuse silence, prejudice finds no sanctuary, and the bond of mutual respect becomes the strongest shield of all. If you found yourself in her shoes, battered but unbroken, what would your next move be? First, you'd gather every scrap of proof: dashcam video, bystander recordings, dispatch logs, witness contact sheets, locking them into secure files to ensure no one could snuff out the truth. With that digital dossier in hand, you'd reach out to national media and respected human rights organizations, demanding their spotlight so this story cannot be swept under any local rug. Then you'd call on the Department of Justice and the Department of Defense to open truly independent investigations. You'd press your congressional representatives to sponsor legislation mandating robust de-escalation protocols for every traffic stop, civilian oversight boards endowed with real subpoena power and crystal clear guidelines on the use of force. No more trust us only policies written in black and white, enforced in daylight. But legal reform is only half the battle. You'd convene neighborhood forums where residents and officers share a meal and speak heart to heart, no podiums, no cameras, just honest conversation. You'd partner with schools to bring those dashcam images into civics classes, letting young citizens witness both the danger and the dignity of standing firm. You'd embed those lived experiences into every training module, each new recruit learning that a moment of bias can cost a life, and that empathy is the most crucial headgear a public servant can wear. By channeling personal pain into collective purpose, you'd keep the heat turned up on entrenched systems, celebrating every incremental policy victory while never letting complacency creep back in. This is how paper promises become daily practice, how words like respect and accountability leap off the page and into real-world action. Because genuine reform demands more than one courageous stand. It requires each of us to keep raising our voices and our standards until justice is not an aspiration, but the air we all breathe. A year after that fateful day, the very stretch of road bears a modest bronze plaque, "Honor Under Fire." Under magnolia blooms the veteran, now fully healed, led a quiet dedication. In full dress uniform, she placed a folded flag, calling it a symbol of dignity, and breached trust into a glass case above the marker. Uniformed officers snapped impeccable salutes, while families and neighbors, young and old, black and white, stood in hushed solidarity. Children waved small flags and veterans wiped tears of pride and remembrance. There was no marching band or grandstand. The ceremony's power lay in each bowed head and respectful nod. In that moment, Oakage County publicly acknowledged its journey from hidden prejudice to emerging justice. By choosing a simple act of remembrance over spectacle, the community pledged to remain vigilant, guarding the fragile promise that respect and justice must travel hand in hand every day in every corner of their town. Through this journey, we learn that justice only prevails when it is ignited by courage and steadfastness. The message is clear. Never accept silence in the face of wrongdoing, for silence empowers prejudice to endure. If you were the protagonist, you would secure every piece of evidence, video, audio recordings, witness statements, and share them with the media and human rights organizations so that the truth cannot be buried. You would demand independent investigations, push for revisions to traffic stop procedures, establish a civilian oversight boards with subpoena power, and ensure transparent use of force policies. At the same time, you would host community police dialogues integrating the experiences of vulnerable groups into training programs. It is entirely possible that by 2050, racism could fade away, but that outcome depends on the unwavering efforts of every individual and the ongoing commitment of the community.